Number 11. Heroes arrive at the right time. A group of 5 friends walked home from dinner in Ashton-under-Lyne, England one evening in 2019 when they spotted a man dragging a woman into an alleyway. The culprit was holding the victim down and had his hand over her mouth to stop her from screaming. However, when the suspect realized that someone was watching him, he ran. One member of the group stayed behind to comfort the terrified victim, while the other 4 friends chased after the attacker, who was later identified as 23-year-old Ryan Bennison. They managed to catch up with him and sat on him until the police arrived to handle the situation. The victim was on her way to visit her brother that evening when Bennison approached her and asked for a cigarette. She gave one to him and walked away, but he approached her again a little while later asking for a lighter. They then smoked a cigarette together, which was when Bennison began putting the moves on her. After going along with his advances for just a few seconds, the woman decided she didn't want to continue. She pulled away, and when he didn't stop, she pushed him off her and began walking away. Bennison persisted though, inviting her over to his place. When she said no and kept walking, the man didn't give up. He grabbed the victim and started dragging her, at which point the 5 heroes saw what was happening and intervened. In court, Bennison claimed that he was being falsely accused and that he was tickling the victim, which was what caused her muffled screams. His lawyer later argued that Bennison acted on impulse, but that he wasn't cold and calculating. He ultimately pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. Number 10. No time for clothes. During the early morning hours one day in late 2022, former military officer Scott Freeman awoke to his dog barking inside his home in Australia's Gold Coast. He chased after a group of young thieves who'd broken into his house, but they managed to escape. The teams made off with a handful of items, including Freeman's wife's purse and some jewelry, but he was mainly glad that his family was safe and that the perpetrators were gone. Freeman and his wife went back to bed, unaware that the suspects had left the back door ajar with plans to return. Less than an hour later, the couple woke up to a commotion once again. Remembering how the thieves had failed to take his wallet and car keys during the first robbery and were likely back for both items, Freeman didn't waste any time getting dressed. He rushed downstairs in his underwear and cornered 2 of the suspects. Freeman managed to tackle one of them and tried getting the young man to unlock his phone so he could call the police. Neighbors overheard the noise and called the police, who arrested the suspect. Unfortunately, Freeman wasn't convinced that much would be done about the crime, especially as thefts skyrocket in the Gold Coast region. He told Today that he didn't blame the police for the ongoing issues with crime and that he believed they were doing everything they can. However, he said that he hoped politicians would make the legislative changes he felt were necessary to get the problem under control. Number 9. Transient takedown. While riding their bikes through Bloomington, Indiana one day in 2021, 2 transients spotted a man who they believed had tried to run them over with a car at a homeless encampment the night before. Instead of calling the police, they decided to try taking the suspect down on their own. He repeatedly tried to flee, even after the man hit him in the legs with a metal bat and stopped him from getting into a passing car. At some point, officers joined the pursuit and caught up with him. The suspect was later identified as 42-year-old Robert Dustin Pittman. He turned down medical treatment despite some bleeding wounds on his legs from being hit with the bat, and he declined to press charges against the men who chased after him. However, Pittman had some warrants out for his arrest for unrelated incidents, and police discovered probable cause that led them to believe that he'd stolen a car. Inside the vehicle he was driving, they found items that had been reported stolen by break-in victims. Unfortunately, though, Pittman wasn't charged in connection with the incident at the homeless encampment due to a lack of evidence. In addition to the charges listed in the arrest warrants, he was charged with vehicle theft, 4 counts of theft, and 2 counts of unauthorized entry into a vehicle. Although this case happened back in 2021, the outcome is unclear. Number 8. Civilians nab alleged cop killer. Early one morning in 2022, a trio of thieves burglarized a home in the South African city of Tshwane. The family fought back, but 41-year-old off-duty cop Tumelo Losaba was fatally wounded in the process. One of the suspects was also killed in the encounter while another sped off in a getaway vehicle. The third thief fled on foot, but he couldn't escape the several residents who emerged from their homes and chased after him. He was subsequently apprehended and taken into custody on suspicion of murder and robbery. In the meantime, authorities launched a manhunt in search of the man who successfully fled the scene. A police spokesperson commended the community members who bravely stepped in to ensure that the alleged killer was brought to justice. However, the agency also reminded the public that while citizens' arrests are legal in the country, the law states that the person carrying out the arrest must have witnessed the crime or at least needs to have reasonable suspicion of the suspect's guilt. They must also have the intention of turning the suspect over to police as soon as possible. Number 7. Market boss tackles meat thief. Much like the US and many other countries, Australia is facing skyrocketing food costs due to inflation. It's made certain groceries popular among thieves, including meat. And it's not just people in need who are stealing these items, but habitual criminals who are using it as a currency to buy drugs. Store owners are understandably getting frustrated with the increase in thefts, including one supermarket CEO who decided to take matter into his own hands when he saw a repeat offender stealing at his family's own business in Sydney. By the time this particular incident happened in early 2023, the suspect had allegedly stolen thousands of dollars worth of meat from the store. Footage of the incident shows the thief wheeling a suitcase filled with prime cuts of beef as the shop owner chases after him and tackles him to the ground. The businessman performed a citizen's arrest, and the suspect was subsequently taken into custody. Unfortunately, this likely won't be the only theft of its kind that the owner will be faced with. As prices continue to rise, it's possible that certain types of food will become increasingly valuable on the black market. Number 6. Aggressive flyer pinned by passengers. In 2022, chaos broke out on a Ryanair flight from London to Lithuania when an intoxicated passenger lost his cool because employees asked him to stop drinking alcohol. The man began shouting aggressively at fellow passengers, including someone who had a child with them. Someone that was believed to be the irate man's father tried to restrain him during the tirade, only to get punched. 2 employees stepped in, but their attempt to de-escalate the situation had the opposite effect. As the man's behavior became increasingly threatening, several passengers surrounded him and helped the employees in their efforts to calm him down. When it became clear that he wasn't going to comply, the 2 employees and fed-up passengers restrained the man, with as many as 7 people joining in to get him under control. Cell phone footage of the incident shows the problematic passenger disappearing from view as the group wrestles him to the ground. The man was arrested once the plane landed, and according to a passenger who spoke with the press, his father was mortified by the whole situation. Number 5. Bystanders stand for justice. A 19-year-old woman had just finished her work shift at a business in Sydney at around 1 a.m. in 2023 when she found a strange middle-aged man sitting in her car. Bystanders rushed over to the woman's aid and repeatedly asked the man to exit the vehicle. He responded by assaulting the woman and a 49-year-old man who'd come by to help. The suspect then tried to flee, but the civilians who witnessed his violent behavior weren't about to let that happen. They subsequently tackled him to the ground and held him there until police arrived. The woman suffered facial injuries but declined medical treatment, while the 49-year-old victim was taken to the hospital with multiple head wounds. After also receiving treatment for injuries, the suspect was taken into police custody. He was charged with entering a vehicle without the consent of the owner-occupier, 2 counts of assault, reckless wounding, and using an offensive weapon with the intent to commit an indictable offense. This case happened so recently that an outcome has yet to be reached. Hopefully, though, the suspect will get what he deserves. Number 4. Disrobing passenger tied to chair. Shortly after a passenger jet took off from Vladivostok, Russia one day in 2021, a 39-year-old woman who appeared to be under the influence of some type of drug rose from her seat and began wandering around the cabin. She appeared disoriented as she removed her clothes and put them back on, paying no mind to the employees who were ordering her to sit down. Concerned about the woman's state of mind as well as their own safety, onlookers worked together with crew members to get her back to her seat. where they restrained her using rope, tape, and a seatbelt. She was kept there for the rest of the flight, and she was arrested when the plane landed in Novosibirsk. The woman allegedly admitted to having taken a synthetic drug before she boarded the flight. She was taken for a medical exam to determine her level of intoxication and was consequently charged with petty hooliganism. Number 3. Local heroes stop armed robbery. 2 men entered a tobacco shop in Sydney, Australia one afternoon in early 2023 and robbed it at gunpoint, then attempted to make off with stolen cigarettes, lighters, and several $1,000s in cash. They drew the attention of nearby customers in the shopping center where the business was located, and civilians immediately sprang into action to stop the thieves. One young woman wasted no time rushing into the store. She grabbed onto one of the suspects, who hit her with an ashtray, but the teen kept fighting, dragging the man down by his hoodie and holding his wrist behind his back. The girl's mother, who'd worked in security for over 20 years, overheard the chaos and rushed over, along with other bystanders, including a woman who removed the keys from the ignition of the thieves' getaway car. In the meantime, others pinned the robbers to the ground and held them there. The shoppers, who were praised as local heroes, were unaware that the suspects were armed. It was only after police arrived and found a gun on one of the men that the civilians realized how much worse things could have gone. Number 2. Fraud victim tracks down perpetrator. When the police didn't seem interested in helping catch the criminal who broke into his car and stole his wife's purse, 38-year-old Scott Dunster was determined to bring the culprit to justice. The theft happened outside the couple's home in East Sussex, England on New Year's Eve in 2022. After discovering that the perpetrator bought something with a debit card for an account that he shared with his wife, Dunster went to the store and asked to see their surveillance footage from the time of the purchase. He took images from the footage to the police, but they didn't address the case as quickly as Dunster wanted them to. So he posted the photos on social media, and community members quickly identified the suspect as 27-year-old Joseph Koss. One day, Dunster's friend spotted Koss out in public. When he failed to reach the police, he went to the location and confronted the suspect himself, who attempted to flee. Dunster chased after Koss, running about 1,800 feet through the town center before catching up with and tackling the alleged thief to the ground with help from nearby security guards. In the end, Koss pled guilty to fraud for using the debit card, but there wasn't enough evidence to charge him in the theft of the purse, which was eventually found. As a result, he was sentenced to 35 weeks in prison. Number 1. Off-duty cop catches thieving teens. In 2022, 2 teens with hilariously bad luck decided to steal a van on Boxing Day in Australia and caught the attention of a large civilian and an off-duty police officer. They were first spotted by 6'4" Gold Coast businessman Bradley Cowper, who noticed the van driving erratically, reaching speeds of up to 75 miles per hour and narrowly avoiding a cyclist. When Cowper saw 2 young men inside the vehicle wearing COVID masks and gloves, he began to suspect it was stolen. He'd been the victim of a car theft before, so he felt a duty to get to the bottom of the situation. As soon as the van stopped long enough for him to approach, he walked up, opened the door, and tried grabbing the driver, who threw the vehicle into reverse and initially managed to avoid capture. A few minutes later, Cowper spotted the van on a curb with visible damage. Unlike the first encounter, the young men froze with fear as the entrepreneur approached. Cowper yelled out to bystanders for help detaining the boys, one of whom begged for his life, while the other said that his mom was going to kill him. There just happened to be an off-duty cop living in a nearby house who overheard the commotion and came out to help. The clearly terrified suspects continued to apologize profusely as they were held to the ground until police arrived. Would you rather live in a place where you could get in trouble for trying to perform a citizen's arrest on a home intruder, or where the laws that allow people to shoot in self-defense seem terrifyingly generous when it comes to what qualifies as justified shooting? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.